We're going to call the meeting to order. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We're going to move on to our Golden Apple Awards. Dr. Lons.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I turn it over to Mr. Dan Durkin.
Thank you, Dr. Lons. Tonight's Golden Apple recipients are Roger Martin and Chris Huseman, volunteers of the Walled Lake Northern Marching Band. Chris and Roger, can you join us up here, please? Roger and Chris were nominated by Walled Lake Northern parent Lisa Massett because of their dedication to the Northern Marching Band for the past 19 years. Even though their own children have graduated from the program, they still return year after year to ensure that current students in the marching band are photographed and celebrated each year. As professional photographers, Roger and Chris make sure that each student is photographed throughout the season. They attend home performances and practices, and before the season starts, attend both the home and away band camps. Roger also takes extra time to photograph each senior so that buttons can be made for the parents to wear on senior night. Further, he's on the field for senior night capturing wonderful photographs of each senior family. Chris goes the extra mile for the marching band's end-of-season banquet. He creates a video for the banquet featuring the seniors, showcasing highlights of the season's show, and includes plenty of candid photos of the students having fun as part of the band. It is a wonderful way to celebrate the group's accomplishments. Roger and Chris, thank you both for your dedication to the Northern Marching Band and the thousands of students you've highlighted over the years. It is our honor to recognize you this evening.
Thank you and congratulations. We're going to move on to our facility study update. Dr. Lons.
Thank you, Madam President. It's my privilege to introduce Mr. Paul Wills from Plant Moran Rio Point. Paul, thank you so much for taking time to come in tonight. We know that you have a company function that you stepped away from, so we appreciate you taking the time and updating us on the transition program or process. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you so much. Madam President, Dr. Lyons, and good evening, board members. For tonight, what we have is basically kind of an engagement overview of what were the goals and objectives of the Phase 2 facility utilization assessments. Taking a look at the current 4 cohorts for the current middle schools. We're going to talk about what that means from a number of students, size of facilities, looking at enrollment capacities. And then from that, we actually had a 60-plus person committee that's actually met over the last year and a half, so we've got some recommendations from that perspective of what that means, and ultimately kind of those next steps relative to the program itself. So again, if you take a look, this actually goes back to the 2018 facility summary that actually was the impetus of the previous bond. Again, several long-term recommendations were going back to 2012, kind of the peak of the enrollment at Walled Lake schools, which is just under 15,600. Looking at the 2024 enrollment, about 12,105. So it's about a decrease of about 3,400 students over that 12-year period. So again, every square footage that you're overutilized, that's taking away from programmatics and staffing and things of that nature going forward. So again, the purpose of the 23 facility assessment was looking at continuing options to identify how to effectively really take a look at your assets as a whole and basically take a look at some projected trends and ultimately maximizing your facilities in comparison to enrollment. So again, the good news is this wasn't just a small group of individuals. As I mentioned, it was about 60 individuals. We met for about a year and a half, most recently in September and October. Kind of once the school year got started back up, we got the new fall enrollment. Again, it was comprised of teachers, community members, staff, administrators, so again, a wide variety of input from that perspective. And then again, passage of the 24 bond, one of the impetuses was to take a look at right-sizing the district, looking at how to utilize potentially one repurposed facility to accommodate this facility here, as well as potential growth for ATP, as well as Twin Sun. And then at the end of the day, good news is the bond did include enhancements monies for any of the 4 facilities that were kind of being considered. So it's not like you have to take from one project to make the projects go going forward. So the goals and objectives are really taking a look at the 4 middle school facilities, understanding that adjusting feeder patterns and potentially boundaries to align 12 current elementary schools to 3 middle schools and ultimately to 3 high schools. And as I mentioned, potentially growth space for ATP because again, it's at capacity and looking at future growth. So again, this is the current feeder pattern. So the first column you have is the elementary schools. And what you have is the 4 middle school configurations. So what happens is that from the elementary to middle school, those students, I'm just going to use commerce for example, 100% of those students ultimately go to CH Smart, which then ultimately go to Northern. What you see right now is there's actually splits that happen at the middle school to high school. So those students are actually taken apart from their cohort. And again, some are going to Northern, some are going to go to Central going forward. So one of the things we took a look at was what is the existing elementary school boundaries. So from that perspective, here's your 12 elementary schools with the current existing boundaries. As you can see with the red stars, this is the location of the middle schools, again with the overlays of the existing middle school boundary. And again, the schools themselves. So the good news is each of the schools is about 140 to 150,000 square feet. This is Sarah Bank specifically, built in 1998, just over 144,000 square feet, but it sits on 37 acres. 50-year plan. If you ever had to expand, you do have some acreage there that would allow some potential expansion with this particular site going forward. And as you can see, this is the left-hand side, the lower left-hand side of the district. The capacity of that building is just over 1,000 students. When you take a look at the enrollments currently in 2024, there's about 593 students, which is a decrease of about 264 students since 2006. Next, we're moving on to Geisler. Again, this is built in 1992. It's about 149,000 acres, just slightly larger, but you'll notice it's about 13 acres. So again, this does share some facility size with transportation, administration, some athletic fields. The actual capacity of that building is 833 students. At the peak in 2006, there was actually over 902 students. And most recently, the enrollment is about 622 students, or roughly a 280 student decrease from the high point there. Next is Clifford Smart, again, in the north end of the district, built in 1991. Coincidentally, there was actually original structure from 58, so obviously this has been improved over the years. This facility is about 154,000 square feet. It does sit on 26 acres. So again, kind of in a 50-year analysis, potentially expand the north end of that site should the district need it. Enrollment in 2006 was 969 students. The capacity of that facility is 990 students, and it's currently about 897 students, so a very highly utilized facility from that perspective. And lastly, we have Walnut Creek Middle School, again, built in 1998. Similarly, sits on about 29 acres, so the south end of the district potentially could be used for future expansion. The enrollment at the high point was 893 students. The capacity of the building is about 968 students, and the current enrollment is about 643 students, or a decrease of 250 from the high of 2006. So why don't we kind of walk through those floor plans? So we're looking at expandability, we're looking at capacity, we're looking at utilization. So one of the things we took a look at is what is that next 6 to 8 grade cohort? So the numbers that you see in each of those boundaries, this is the 5-year projected enrollment in comparison to this year's enrollment of the 6th and 7th and 8th graders that are going to be there in the next 1 to 5 years, if you will. So again, right now you'd see some of those splits at the middle school, high school level, if nothing was to change going forward. So we started doing the what ifs. So again, looking at a variety of different examples. So for instance, this is the recommended concept, about 82% recommend approval percentage of the 60 plus individuals. Some of the reasons for a Geisler, It is centrally located. And again, this would be for a repurposed facility. This would be able to accommodate ESC, which is about 53,000 square feet, and roughly 20,000 square feet for ATP. But what you'd see is Commerce, Dublin, Keith, and Glengarry, those students actually all stay together through middle school to CH Smart, and they actually all stay together up to Northern. So we're not splitting anyone from middle school to high schools going forward. CH Smart would be about 924 students at its peak. From the Walnut Creek's perspective, you'll see there on the right-hand side, what we have is Oakley, Pleasant Lake, Guest, and Loon Lake. 100% of those students would cohort into Walnut Creek, and then ultimately up to Central. And then lastly, Banks, which would be the southwest middle school that would stay, would you have Meadowbrook, Walled Lake, Wixom, and Hickory Grove. And again, 100% of those students would cohort ultimately to Sarah Banks Middle School and ultimately to Western. So again, kind of taking a look at Geisler getting repurposed for Central, but keeping 3 of the existing middle schools for middle school education. And again, increasing that utilization from 60, 70% upwards of 85 to 90% going forward. We also looked at various other concepts. So again, this is what would happen, let's say, potentially if Banks, which is in the Western Central location. Looked at that. It does have a smaller enrollment. It does have a larger site. So again, same consideration in terms of trying to keep all the students from the elementary, middle school, and high school going forward. And then lastly, Walnut Creek. Again, this would be the impact, again, very similar to being able to keep those students through their cohorts going forward. You may ask, where was the opportunity for the north? And again, we looked at some of the traffic patterns and where the next transitions would be, and unfortunately, those kids would be on the bus well in excess of 60 minutes, so that analysis was reviewed, but not ultimately being considered going forward. So the consensus recommendation, we asked the question. Again, this is over 2 different working sessions, as well as 2 different data set points, if you will. But based on considerations, the location of middle schools, acreage for capacities, enrollments, what schools should be repurposed. And again, as I mentioned, the answer was Geisler Middle School. And again, really based this on a couple of things. So again, centrally located with the district. If you're not familiar with the site, the operations facility is actually in the north end. They share the same driveway. It is the smallest student capacity. So again, you start looking at things such as school of choice. The location within the district. Our understanding is that the school of choice approach in our district is going to stay the same. So again, when you have a larger facilities that would remain open, again, gives that district an opportunity for that future growth. Also, one of the recommendations is it does keep the ability for those elementary school kids to really cohort through the middle school and high school going forward. So next steps, as I mentioned, we kind of had a restart of phase 2 in September. Again, really took a look at the recommendations, came out of the 23 with the bond passing, and then ultimately we did the in-depth review of enrollments, utilization, expansions, capital needs, ultimately for this. So we're here at the November 7th board meeting to, again, provide an update of where we're at from the process standpoint. We're here to entertain any questions the board may have. Ultimately come back to the December 5th meeting with a final adoption for implementation, I believe, for the fall of 25 school year. So with that, I'll turn over to President Kaplan and Dr. Lyons of the board for questions.
Thank you. Mrs.
Kaplan?
Casagrande.
So Dr. Lyons, I know you and I talked about this just a little bit. Could we talk a little bit about what happens, if anything, with the special education patterns and how we're growing and how they're impacted? I know that was something that was a question and a concern the last time we went through this when we closed 2 elementary schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Casagrande. It is important for our community to know that the restructuring that we're doing now is significantly different than what happened in our most recent past. We're not changing our elementary catchment areas or the boundaries. So if you're going to Meadowbrook Elementary, you're still going to go to Meadowbrook Elementary. And our challenge always has been with our special education, specifically our self-contained programs, is that finding space for those programs and also making sure that we have the right amount of programs for the students that we have. And so as part of looking at our district efficiently, we can't have the same in each and every special ed self-contained program in all of our schools. And so Ms. Muir has been looking at these feeder patterns as we have changed some of the feeder patterns because Geisler is no longer an option. and to try to make sure that students that are in a particular self-contained program at Loon Lake would then move into that middle school that it feeds into, that would move into the high school that it feeds into. Right now, that's not always the case, and there, as I mentioned, there's reasons for that. But we do know with the expansion of our self-contained programs, we're looking not only of expanding in the current building that it's in, but also expanding it to new buildings to once again maintain that feeder pattern to the best of our ability. It won't be 100%, but it is something that we're cognizant of as we're looking at this plan, and we were before this plan even. And so we are working to do the best we can to have that alignment.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Siegler?
Thank you, Ms. Kaplan. You know, one of the things that we heard years ago when we were doing the earlier redistricting was try to keep our students together, try to maintain a feeder pattern. There were many parents that were upset because some of the splits and some of the splits both at middle school and at the high school level. And, you know, unfortunately, with a decreasing population, right sizing is what we have to do at this point in time. When you think about Walled Lake Middle School, Geisler, when we first opened it up, the state would not allow us to build it any bigger at that time, and we had, I believe, 8 to 12 portables in the back of the building. And I can say that as a parent because my daughter was one of those. As a 7th grader that had the pleasure of being in the portables, she wasn't too happy with me. You know, to see us at a point of 85 to 90% utilization, I think is probably optimal for all of us within the district. And also to be able to repurpose a building that, you know, it will open up other opportunities in my thought process as we look forward to opportunities for unified sports, community activities, you know, meeting rooms for the community, and the list could just go on from there. So I really do appreciate this, and I want to thank everybody that's been involved with the committees because, again, with the last redistricting, we put this out to the community. The community came back to the board with the recommendation. This was not board-driven, this was community-driven. And I appreciate the fact of everybody that's involved because, again, this is coming back to us. This is not this is the recommendation from the community, from the committees to the board. This is not something that we are just saying, this is what we're doing, thank you, you know. So I want to thank everybody that's on the committee because I also know it's very difficult to be sitting there a lot of times with your friends and neighbors who don't necessarily feel the same way about what's going on, and we appreciate that.
I just want to say, I was one of those parents that fought with the district over the middle school cohorts, and everyone trying to stay in cohort rather than splitting numerous times. So at this point, I am pretty pleased to see, even though it's past my time, I am pretty pleased to see the cohorts because it is, to me personally, and you know, as a social worker and dealing with therapy and students, especially in the middle school ages, that's their most informative years. And to me, that's a very hard thing to coming from an elementary to a middle and telling these students, okay, now you're splitting between your elementary kids that you knew, and now guess what? Now, through your most informative years, you've grown, you've gone through puberty, most likely, and now you're gonna leave all those people that you just went through that experience with, and you're gonna go back to a high school, back to with your elementary peers that was 3 years ago. So to me, that was a very hard thing to swallow. So I'm very, very pleased. I think that will be an emotional benefit to our students. So I appreciate trying to keep the cohorts together. So thank you on that. Mrs. Crafton?
Yeah, I see a few people here tonight that were participating in the facilities committee. And so Dr. Lanz, I thought it might be helpful for you to highlight a few of the little changes that have been made to the presentation so that everyone can get clear where the tweaks were.
The major change that we made was to look at our elementaries and to assure or ensure that they would end up at the same high school that they're at today. And so we did move some of the elementaries around to do that. And so it did look slightly different than what was originally presented at the committee. We knew that the 3 elementaries, Guest, Meadowbrook, Meadowbrook and Hickory Woods had to move, right? Because they were going to Geisler, and that's not an option anymore. So then we looked at where could we move Glengarry and Loon Lake to again ensure that they ended up at the same high school. So I appreciate the feedback that we had, and that gave our teams some time to dig into this and to make those changes.
One other follow-up. I live in the area that feeds to Meadowbrook and then to Geisler. And so I've had a lot of community engagement on this topic, as you all know, because we've been working together as well. I'd love, at a high level, for you to share the plans for staffing when Geisler closes, if that's what happens, and then what happens to the current students.
Sure. I can speak better to the staffing right now than the current students, because once we get into scheduling, I'll have a better understanding of how that falls out. Plus, as Mr. Wills mentioned, we're still maintaining our in-district transfer process, and some people may decide to go to different places along with school of choice. But I've been very fortunate with Mr. Scanley and Mr. Hamka to have some opportunity to speak with the Geisler staff, and we'll be going back to speak to them after tonight to talk about, and when I say staff, I mean everybody in the building that is working with us, that we do not predict any layoffs as a function of this process. In the past, and typically when districts go through this process, it's not only to gain efficiencies, but it's also to reduce staff. And many people in this room were part of that last time we did that. That fortunately was not the impetus for this. Now, the unfortunate part is that times have changed and we have openings everywhere all the time. And so we know that we have teacher openings, we know that we'll have teacher retirements. Right now, everyone's well aware that we have paraprofessional openings and food service openings. Anyone interested, please feel free to reach out to Mr. Hamka. He'd be happy to interview you tonight even, that's fine. So we do not predict that in the end, anyone will not have a job that wants to have a job. Now, it may not be at the middle school that you want or the high school that you want. You may be teaching 6th grade this year, you may be teaching 7th grade next year. But as a person who was involved in human resources in the district for 4 years and now 7 years in the district, that's relatively standard practice, right? Because we do have to make adjustments as our population shifts over time. And so I was pleased to share that with the board, and I was pleased to share that with the staff. And we talked about it in our committee meeting, but I'm also pleased to share it with the community. The teachers that you love now and the food service people that you love, the custodians, everybody that's involved is still going to be involved in your child's life moving forward. Now, again, your favorite teacher might end up at Geisler, and to be transparent, you might end up at Creek, right? That's possible. But the good news is we'll have a new favorite teacher at Creek because we have fantastic teachers and staff in all of our buildings. I hope, did I answer that? Yep. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Levin?
So I think that the process to get to here, was a little bumpy. Sometimes it goes a little detours and whatever, but I'm pleased with where we've ended up. And I think, everybody on the committee and the administration for the work that they've done to hear feedback, both from the board and the committee to make the adjustments like you just alluded to, because there were some real concerns in the community about, school of choice transfers and, where you're going to end up at the end. There is one more piece of feedback that, I don't know if anybody's going to address in public comment, but it's come to me, so I figure it's worth bringing up. Some of the people involved in the committee felt like the decision was already made before they sat down at the last meeting. And I think that, one of the things the board has traditionally tried to do is, let this be the committee's decision. But I think sometimes it's worth maybe being a little bit more transparent with the committee to, if a clear choice is made, or if a clear choice exists for us to just say, yeah, this is the clear choice. Yes, sure, yeah, you've been on the committee, but to not, for lack of a better description, waste their time. The feedback that I got is that the committee basically met for 5 minutes and discussed something, and I was like, okay, well, here's the choices, and some of the choices weren't even, or some of the options weren't even prepared as real options because there wasn't a realistic way that the discussion was going to go that way. They really felt like the decision had already been made. And while we haven't officially made any decisions in any direction, I think that if we're truly going to want the committee's feedback, that we should, really be thoughtful about any committee that we put together to not have foregone conclusions. And, what matters less is the appearance of who made the decision of who actually made the decision. So some people asked me to bring those concerns forward today. And, what's done is done. I think where we end up is the right place. But I just think it's important when we ask the community to give of their time for so long, as we've done with this facilities committee, to not spend unnecessary time if there's just not a real different direction things are going to go. So I just wanted to make sure somebody heard that, and the people that brought this to me hear that I'm bringing it up here as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wills. And again, enjoy your and your company function tonight.
No problem. Thank you. There you go. Thanks.
So we're going to move on to public commentary. You have 3 minutes to address the board. It's not a conversation. If there's follow-up that's needed, a member of Dr. Lon's staff or a member of the board will be in contact with you. There's a timer on the wall if you can keep your eye on it. If you're getting to the end of your time, Mr. Siegler will remind you to wrap up your comments. You don't have to stop, just finish up what you're saying, please. And, let's keep it calm and nice. So we appreciate that, and we're going to start with Mr. Smith.
Starting. Good evening. My name is Michael Smith, lifelong resident of White Lake Township and proud alumni of the district. I want to start off by thanking the voters for approving the operating millage for the future operations of our district. Of course, on a personal note, I want to give my heartfelt thanks to all my family, friends, neighbors, and supporters who gave everything to my campaign. I want to thank those who stepped up and ran for office as well and put themselves out there. It's really a hard job to do that, to put yourself out there and to run for office, to show your dedication to this district and to the students. I am so grateful for all that you put your trust in me and elected me to the Walled Lake School Board. The Walled Lake School District has really made me who I am today. Who would have thought that a quiet musician, artist, and introspective kid back in high school at Walled Lake Central would now be eventually going to be serving up there on the board once again. So I'm humbled and so honored to work with the two of my fellow slate members as well as the rest of the board moving forward. And we have a lot of work. I want to thank you again to Ron Lippett for his advocacy and service. And I know that this will not be the last time we'll be seeing you. And your dedication to this district is unmatched. Next, I want to give a few special shout outs personally. I want to acknowledge the Walled Lake Competitive Marching Band for claiming the MCBA State Championship. It's pretty amazing. I want to thank the Dublin PTA for hosting such an amazing trunk or treat program. And shout out to my son's fifth grade teacher, Mr. Krimmel, for starting up an archery club program at Dublin. We've gotten amazing interest in it, and my son is excited to start that to kind of track for middle school and then on to high school. I want to acknowledge the CHS volleyball teams claiming the LVC championship. Way to go, girls. I also want to acknowledge the boys and girls CHS cross-country teams for their Zone 3 regional championship. Clearly, it's near and dear to me as my own daughter goes to CHS, so I really like to see that. But all the students that we have on there. So I want to also give props to the Walled Lake Central High Schoolers for their volunteer project. It's such amazing work that they do for the community. And I also am excited on a personal note to go see the Walled Lake Western's Addams Family in a few weeks. So that's really looking forward to that show. And these things are just, some of the little snippets of how amazing our district is. And while I know there's a lot of work to be done, the students, staff, and teachers and parents in this district are the backbone of our community. And I am thankful for all that we do and all that you do every day. And just remember, I always like to have a little quote, you can't have a better tomorrow if you are thinking about yesterday all the time. So let's move forward together and continue to make Walled Lake Schools a place we are proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Watson.
Good evening. My name is Lori Watson, and I'm a visual arts teacher at Western High School. I am here on behalf of Western's therapy dog, Dakota, who I have known since she was introduced to our school many years ago. I am speaking on behalf of Dakota's best interest and have no ulterior motives other than for her to have the best life possible, as I have grown very fond of her over the years. A couple of years ago, while Dakota was with her second handler, my husband and I became an unofficial backup care for her when needed. She has spent many days and nights in our home, and became a welcome guest and friends with our 2 dogs. During those 2 years, I did begin to notice a change in her behavior and appearance, as did students and other teachers at our school. I am not insinuating that she was neglected or abused, but she did put on extra weight and did seem depressed and lethargic at times. I also questioned how many events she was being taken to because she seemed tired and didn't have her usual spark. It was also noticeable at times that she had a bit of an odor. Last spring, we found a tick on her after a walk in the woods and reported this to her handler, who mentioned, yeah, she needs to get flea and tick meds and heartworm medication. It's been a while. At the end of the last school year, I became aware that Dakota was losing her handler. It was, of course, upsetting, and we tried our best to provide support to both of them. We even applied to be backup for the future handler instead of the main caretaker, as we could not imagine having 3 dogs in our home full-time. The last time we saw Dakota was early June, and then not again until the first day of registration for students. When I saw her again, I could immediately see a change in her appearance and attitude. She had clearly lost weight, and she looked healthy and had her spark back. Her coat was shinier and whiter. She was happy to see me, as well as all the other students and staff returning to the building. Since then, I'm very happy to report she continues to look and smell great, and her overall attitude is so much better. Students and teachers alike have commented on this to me specifically. She also seems to have a more balanced schedule with events and is not being run all over town to different events. I am here in support of Dakota staying with her current handler, who is taking very good care of her. And I was honestly shocked to hear through social media and also watching last month's board meeting that she is currently being mistreated, is overweight, and has an injury. The complete opposite is true. During our recent Powder Puff games, I saw Dakota running up and down the sidelines, playing fetch, and having the time of her life. This dog literally looks like she has a smile on her face now. I am so relieved to see her doing well and believe she is currently in the best hands and should not be displaced again. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Sandra Beyer.
I've sat many times listening to commentary that I do not agree with. And so this evening, I'm asking for respect, since I have listened in the past respectfully, even though I know that some of you may not like what I have to say. Free speech is a First Amendment right. Censored speech is not free speech. First, I want to thank the Back to Basics slate of candidates for maintaining integrity in the face of hostile opposition. Before last month's board meeting, there were hate signs placed next to the Back to Basics slate signs. Then there were hate signs placed at major intersections throughout the district. Additionally, there were class signs placed in front of the Back to Basics signs, totally blocking them. There were other places where they were put on the ground or bent. And since our class slate and supporters are very much for diversity, equity, inclusion, and kindness, I'm still wondering how this example of hate signage and removal of your opponent's signs teaches children and youth about good sportsmanship, respect, and kindness. I have no more to say about the election. It's over. I hope and pray that Mrs. Levin and Mrs. Fernandez, and come January, Mrs. West, will continue to ask questions and provide the community regarding transparency and questions for the community regarding all school board issues and decisions. I did very much appreciate Mrs. Fernandez commenting about why she was voting no on an issue last month. I hope to hear more discussions and explanations in the future as I listen to the meetings online. If you've been attending board meetings and listening to them, you cannot deny that Dr. Rebecca Behrens has tried to be a voice of warning about the dangers of pornography to children, about the dangers of transgenderism, of some of the flaws in the reading instruction in the district, of the danger of Biden's rewritten Title IX, and many other things. Now, for the board members and Dr. Lons, did you get your handout? Additionally, the placement of those signs I mentioned previously, earlier, the placement of those signs was observed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kylie, I'm sorry, I'm going to probably mess up your last name. So, okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Kylie and I work at Walled Lake Western. I have worked there for almost 3 years. I want to talk to you today as a rebuttal to previous comments about Dakota. I have known her for almost 3 years and have seen her on a daily. Her and I bonded very quickly when I started. She would come home with me sometimes if her previous handler had to do something, and even spent overnights at our house. The first year I saw her, she was a happy dog, had tons of energy, and loved everyone. At the end of last year, that changed. She was tired, she was lethargic, she didn't want to be in a classroom and would sit by the door just waiting to be let out. Her paws were stained from licking them raw, her gums were fire red, and she was limping. She also had an odor. When she would come into my office, she would run under my desk and not want to move. She was not the Dakota I knew. Many of us had concerns that she was overworked. She was working 12+ hours a day, which was said at the last board meeting. She went to every event at school, whether it was a sporting event or other types of events, like her previous handler explained at the last meeting. That raised red flags. When she was transitioned out of her previous handler's care, people started seeing changes. A week after, her gums were no longer red, she was no longer lethargic, her eyes, once droopy and squinty, were now open and lively again. She was overweight, so she went on a diet. In July, she went to the vet and they were shocked that the dog they were looking at was Dakota. She was so happy and lively. At this visit, the vet was shocked. She didn't have a heart murmur anymore. When brought back to school, students couldn't believe it was Dakota. Parents are commenting every day that they didn't even recognize her because she looks so good. She looks healthy again. Last year, they said she wouldn't even go up to them, or students didn't want to go up to and pet her because she smelled bad. That was completely gone now. She is going up to students again and lying in their laps while they study. She goes up to staff and students wagging her tail. She trots through the halls again. Every staff member has told me multiple times that they have never seen her this happy, have this much energy, engaged with staff and students. At sporting events, she is running on the field, chasing her ball. She's being as goofy as ever. When I looked at the manual, it states, and I quote, "Take the therapy dog to community and school events outside of the school day on a regular basis. Events are school determined and may include, but not limited to, schools welcome back events. District requirements include 1 high school football game, walk in the homecoming parade with students, 2 board meetings, Martin Luther King district event, and 1 community event not related to WLCSD. She should have not been working that much, and I believe it led to her being sick. The fact that she has a clean bill of health from the vet and her heart murmur is gone, her paws are no longer stained brown, her gums are pink, and her energy is through the roof says it all. She does not need to be retired. She just needed to have a positive change. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa West?
Hello, looking forward. I want to thank the community for electing me to the 4-year position for the school board, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Dr. Lyons or Mrs. Kaplan, if you can send me the facility study so I can be prepared for the next meeting, I'd appreciate that. Regarding the facility study, there was a couple concerns I did have as a Glengarry parent. I was attending board meetings about 7 years ago when my daughter was getting ready to go up, move up to the middle school. And there's still a couple concerns I have as a Glengarry parent. There's a small area of Glengarry that is just south of Walled Lake Central. And I still am confused about why they would, when they're literally a 5-minute walk, not a car ride, but a walk to Central, why they would go on to Northern. Also looking at the facility study drafts, it seems that Loon Lake Elementary is closer to Banks, and Meadowbrook may be closer to Creek. They have similar enrollments, and I'm not sure Mrs. Crafton may have more ideas of how that would work with Meadowbrook, but some things that we may want to consider as well before we finalize this plan on how that would affect the families at those schools and how they move on to their higher education. And then finally, I want to thank Chris Heisman and Roger for their wonderful photography expertise. I actually wore my senior button tonight in honor of Roger Martin. I just appreciate them for all of their wonderful photography, and it's just a joy to be able to go through photographs, especially after camp, since I spend my weeks at camp. I don't get to go through photographs until probably weeks after, actually. So it's just, I'm always grateful for everything they've done for the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Andy Klassa?
Hello, I'm Andy Klassa, and I am here to advocate for my friend Dakota, Walled Lake Western's therapy dog. I did this a month ago, and I have a question. How come none of you reached out? You would think that if someone that's known Dakota for 4.5 years comes to you with the fact that Dakota's got a heart issue, arthritis, a UTI, burnout, and is on anxiety meds, and is in the orange section of the canine ladder of communication, you might want to know a little bit more about what's going on, but nobody did. I also was here to review Dakota's schedule while I had her per the manual. She attended 3 to 5 classes a day, 6 hours, 3 to 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, plus extras, with no 90-minute decompress, which is a national standard, scheduled into her schedule, okay? The national standards are 1 to 3 days per week, no more than 2 hours a day, with a 90-minute decompress, okay? If you compare that to Heartland and Brighton, they don't practice that. Okay, Dakota's workload, 1,200 plus students. Why would you do that to the first dog in a high school in Oakland County, the gem of Oakland County? Question number 2, we all want to retire, right? Well, based on the manual, which says that the dog is expected to work 10 years plus the first year in training, that's 11 years, average span of an English yellow lab, and all labs is average lifespan is 10 to 12 years, which means she gets her last year of life in retirement if she makes it to 12. Question number 3. How do you think Dakota felt when you physically removed her from my house on June 5th? Confused, sad, depressed? Okay? Despite the Michigan law that claims that therapy dogs, any kind of service dog, is property, Dakota is not property. Mental and physical health are very important to dogs there as much as they are to us, folks. Come on, folks. Dakota's retirement is long overdue. She has done more for this community, more than any other dog, more for the therapy dog program, including her and I building it up, than any other dog in the district, probably the county. You are all in possession of a letter from a representative from the Alliance for Therapy Dogs, a national organization that sets the standards. I'm pointing this out because in that letter, it is discussed, you are given an idea as to what the right thing to do for Dakota is.
Please conclude your comments.
Why are you so dug in on Dakota? It's my opinion, which I'm not supposed to go to here, but also the opinion of many people, that what you are doing to Dakota is borderline cruel, and abusive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hillary Glazer?
At least this time I don't have to lean over backwards. Good evening. My name is Hillary Glazer. I am the PTSA president at Geisler Middle School. I'm also the Walled Lake PTSA Council president. I promise I am not here to talk about the facility study. Instead, I'm just here tonight as a parent and a proud supporter of our therapy dog program. I'd like to share the wonderful impact that our Therapy Dogs PALS program has on our school and just our districts as a whole. Concern has been raised about the well-being of our therapy dogs. So I'd like to take some time to tell you about what I witness as a parent and frequent volunteer in the various school buildings. Most of us already know the incredible benefits that come with having a therapy dog in school buildings, from improved reading fluency to decreased negative behaviors. But it's not just about academics. It's also about fostering a positive, inclusive environment where students learn empathy, patience, and confidence. As a district parent, I have personally witnessed the magic of these therapy dogs. I watched kids who were once terrified of dogs find the courage to approach and even hug a therapy dog. I've seen students' confidence grow as they read aloud to their furry friends without the fear of judgment, and they're transforming their anxiety into pride. I've watched children shift their behavior when a therapy dog enters the room, suddenly becoming kind and compassionate and mirroring the gentle presence of the dog. Honestly, there's nothing like watching these big football players get all mushy and smushy around these therapy dogs, where they get down on their level and they talk with a different voice and become all excited to see these dogs. But one story that will always stick with me was when my kids were at Guest Elementary. I was making copies in the mailroom for the PTA, and if you've ever been on the PTA board, you know you're there frequently. And a young child who was not a native English speaker, he was an English language learner, initially afraid of dogs, decided to take some small steps to finally pet Champ. It was our first therapy dog in the district. Champ waited very patiently, allowing the student to approach at his own pace. But the sense of accomplishment this kid felt was so profound that he gave himself, honestly, a little pat on the back and then returned to class. A month later, when I went back to make more copies, as you do in the PTA, I saw him hugging Champ. Our therapy dogs bring joy and comfort to students and staff alike. When students and staff need a moment to regroup, the therapy dogs are there calmly by their side. For some students, just being able to place a hand on a therapy dog during a test calms their nerves, making those stressful moments more manageable. It's incredible to see the students writing these heartfelt letters or creating arguments in favor of therapy dogs in every school, where writing is not the assignment, but it's actually an expression of gratitude and connection. But if I'm being honest, it's not just the kids and the staff that benefit from the school therapy dogs.
Please conclude your comments.
Anytime I had an IEP or 504, having a therapy dog in the room just kept my anxieties from creeping up. I'm incredibly grateful for the program, and as my kids will transition to a new school next year, I promise this is the last thing I'll say, it'll be the first school they've ever been in without a therapy dog, and I'm excited to be one of a team of people trying to bring a therapy dog into their school. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Hines?
Hi there. This is my first meeting. I am a new parent to the district. I have a son who is in kindergarten. I am a former teacher, and I'm a big advocate for kids having a childhood and being able to play and have restructured time. My child, including bus time, is at school for 40 hours a week, and he gets a half an hour, as do the other kids, of recess time or unstructured play time. And I was floored as a parent and as a former teacher that that's what we're allowing our students. Yes, I do understand that there is a block recess once a week, and I do understand that there is also physical education twice a week, that still does not even come close to what kids need in childhood. It would reduce mental health. It could help with behaviors in the classroom. And truly, they deserve this. They deserve their own rights as kids to be able to play. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Tim Sawmiller?
Good evening, Tim Sawmiller, Commerce Township. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Sadly, the United States has voted for division and discrimination and intimidation and oppression. Fortunately, the Walled Lake School District did not. This district voted for public schools, for administrators, for teachers, and most importantly, this district voted for students, all students, every child, every day. Some board members apparently like to play politics by using the children of the school district as pawns. Well, the time for playing politics is over, if there ever should be a time to play politics, where this district's school children are concerned. Enough is enough. Tonight, this school board has an excellent opportunity to stop playing politics and help fulfill the trust the voters have placed in you. I strongly urge you to approve the purchase of new replacement school buses so that this district's children can continue to be transported safely and securely between their homes and their schools. The funding was approved in 2019. Use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Van Leeuwen?
I'd like to begin by apologizing to Mrs. Kaplan because I'm probably going to take her remarks away from her. But on Thursday, the 19th of September, Lakes Area Youth Assistance is sponsoring its Taste of the Lakes event. It's been an annual thing. Generally, it's in September. This year, we had to move to November because of remodeling at our facility, Edgewood Country Club. So it will be held on the 19th, 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Do you have your tickets, Mr. Siegler? He's been one of our greatest sponsors and supporters of that event. Anyway, anyone who's interested in attending, your tickets are available online through the school district, or I have one with me right now, but we can easily get more if you're interested. So, Taste of the Lakes, the Tuesday, 19th of November, from 5 o'clock to 8. Thank you, at Edgewood Country Club.
Thank you. We're going to move on to administrative commentary. Dr. Lanz.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Hamka, we'll start with you. Hold, please.
I don't have it.
But
It doesn't matter, just go
Ms.
ahead.
Meyer, yeah, you agree that she turned in a card? Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah, you're fine.
Well, hi, my name is Gabi Tiaga, save the best for last. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Honestly, feeling a bit nervous to be up here, but I wanted to share that I have been told that my job could be at risk if I continue to voice my opinions and post on Facebook topics in regards to community concerns. That really made me think, and ultimately it frustrated me. It frustrates me that someone would try to control me and silence my voice. So instead, I'm here to speak out and will continue to stand on the right side of history. In the last few meetings, it has been brought to our attention, I admit a bit melodramatic, that we are, in quote, in violation of Title IX and will lose our funding. I have been following many districts across the country regarding this situation and how they have been moving forward. Currently, Moms of Liberty and GEI have both filed lawsuits in Michigan. Many lawyers from districts across the country have stated that with the current multiple lawsuits, it would be inadvisable for a district to make a ruling and decide to implement the Biden-Harris Title IX ruling. No district has lost money over this, and for us to react in that manner would only set us up for trouble in the future when whomever votes it in will be proven wrong on all fronts. Anyone who supports boys and girls spaces is wrong, and honestly a bit dangerous. It is harmful to allow boys into our girls' spaces, bathrooms, and sports. It is simple. You tell them the boys' feelings matter more than their safety. Think hard about how that will affect them in the long run. Science taught by this district teaches our children that women and girls have XX and men and boys have XY. This district fought hard to follow the science when it came to masks, and yet it disregards it when it comes to the safety of our girls and young women. Our girls continue to be collateral damage in this social experiment. I'm asking this community to continue to speak up and make your voices heard, no matter the outcome. I also am asking this Board of Education to pump the brakes and not make any permanent decisions in Title IX until the lawsuits are settled. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to administrative commentary. Dr. Lanz.
Mrs. Kohansky, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Dr. Lanz. As I gave a little update last time, I'll give another update this time a little bit about professional development. So on Happy Halloween, which we all enjoyed, our students and families got a half day. Our teachers and staff and administrators remained for some professional learning in the afternoon. And that professional learning for elementary and secondary really focused on the implementation of our MTSS process, kind of looking at what some really recent data from some diagnostics and some other pieces of data, looking at MSTEP and so forth, and pulling all of that together so that we can start to make some instructional decisions, especially early on in the year. As staff and everyone have gotten to know their students in the last month and a half or so, now what are we doing in those next steps based on instructional moves? And so really I want to thank our administrators and our teachers for really working hard that day. I know they worked hard in the morning, especially at the elementary level when it comes to the Halloween parties. I know that for those of you that have lived in the elementary realm like I did for a long time, it's an exhausting morning. So I do want to thank everybody for their tenacity and for their dedication and staying true to the work throughout the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Durkin.
Nothing this evening, Dr. Lenz.
Thank you. Mr. Scaling.
Nothing this evening, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Omer.
Nothing this evening, Dr. Lenz. Thank you.
Mr. Hamka.
Thank you. Nothing this evening.
I have a few things. First, I'd like to mention that we will formally welcome our newest board members, Mr. Smith and Mrs. West, at a future board meeting. And of course, what we're waiting on right now is to make sure that the votes are certified. That's the next step in the process. So I'll save my formal welcome for that, but informally, welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here tonight. Congratulations to Mr. Siegler and Mrs. Crafton on continuing your service on the board. I look forward, and I'm sure I speak for everyone at the table, of continuing to work with you, again, based on the votes being certified. And finally, Mr. Lippett, thank you for your time on the board. It's been a pleasure and an honor to work with you, and thank you for the service to our school district and our students. Finally, I'd like to thank our school community. Thank you for once again supporting a millage and for supporting our schools and for allowing us to operate at the highest possible standard that we can. Please know that I do not, and I know I speak for everyone at the table, we do not take your support for granted. And so once again, thank you for your support. It is very much appreciated. Madam President.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Ms. Levin.
Thank you. Congratulations to those who won the school board race. And thank you to the community for passing the millage. I was very much in support of that. I guess the winners this year are dogs. It's great to see the support that comes out in support of our therapy dog program. I very much support that program. I hope that any future issues bring up this much public comment, because there's a lot of things that are important in our district, and it's good to have your voices be heard. So I would love to have the community speak about anything that's concerning to them. There's a lot of things we're going to be working on, continuing the facility updates and the bond work, and we want to hear from the community. And so thank you for those of you who are participating in the meetings, and I look forward to continuing the work that we are working on now. Thanks.
Mr. Siegler.
As most of the accolades were covered by Mr. Smith earlier this evening, I also want to acknowledge the phenomenal performance of our drama class and our dramatic students at Walled Lake Northern. She Murders Dragons was, She Murders Monsters, rather. Monsters, Dragons. Too much Dungeons and Dragons.
Nailed it.
Was absolutely unbelievable. The topics that they addressed in the production were amazing. I had the opportunity of seeing it with my wife, and then I took my granddaughter back out to see it. And by the time I got out of the parking lot, I looked at her, and she's only 12. I said, "What did you learn?" And she started just going absolutely crazy on topics that she learned and things she saw in the movie. And, you know, even the loss of a sibling and you know, something like that. And I looked at her and I said, "Does it make you love your brother anymore after you saw it?" And she goes, "Yes." So, you know, it struck my heart there. I also, you know, we don't say this enough, and I don't think we realize it enough, but the dedication of our cabinet and Dr. Lons, who I know when I saw him Saturday night, I believe it was the third event of the day that he was partaking in. So, you know, starting at 7 o'clock and not getting home till midnight, I'm sure your family appreciates the fact that you're doing this more often than you have in the past.
They actually appreciate not seeing me, but thank you.
But I wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
I had the pleasure of attending the annual leadership conference in Lansing with Mr. Lippett and Ms. Crafton, and to tell you that it was classes and breakout sessions from morning till night. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable networking. I had the opportunity of going into several classes, listening to experts on school security. I know some of them are already working with Dr. Lons. It was wonderful to find out, you know, when I was asking questions, and they said, "Well, you probably should ask your superintendent in about, you know, 2 months because we're working on plans." And I said, "Oh, you know, thank you." And also attending classes on conflict resolution, which, again, very intense, and I do appreciate the opportunity to do that. And I also had an opportunity of representing our district and the county as a presenter in one presentation up there, so I wanted to thank everybody for the opportunity of doing that. To Mr. Lippett, thank you for your tenure here. I'm sure you will be active in other things within the community. Congratulations to Mrs. West and Ms. Crafton. It was a long period of, for the election. I think my family is actually happy that it's over because I can actually be home for a few days. And I look forward to moving forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Casagrande.
I'm going to reserve my comments when I get to read a proclamation later. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Fernandez.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to use my board commentary today to just mention how some of the sausage is made behind the scenes for us. It's to link that to the new board that we'll have in January, specifically around just the timing and the ability to address important issues that come up on the agenda. Many folks may not know that oftentimes we first see the agenda items when they're posted to the community, which in this case is Friday. So 3 business days, a weekend, 3 business days, and then today's meeting. So when it comes to any topic of detail and concern, tonight's topic on the buses is a good example, there have been exactly 1 weekend and 3 business days in order for everyone on the board to digest the information we're given, share it back individually to Dr. Lons and the cabinet, who have to scramble and put forth tremendous amount of energy to try to answer and bring forward information. And by the time that process happens, as you might imagine, it's usually Wednesday or Thursday, and here we are at the board meeting. So in many cases, this works out very well. In other cases where there's meaty topics and things to be discussed or to be talked about, it doesn't leave a lot of time for us to go back and forth and find out the answers truly to our questions if they go any further than one turn of information back and forth. And so I'm hoping as we start a new year, we're able to look procedurally at the timing of some of these items to make sure that we have some time for some of that back and forth or some advanced bit of information so that it doesn't appear to folks that there are simply political games being played with votes, and that is definitely not the case. There's no fun in this game, this little political game, if that's what it is. So welcome and congratulations to those who will be joining the school board. I look forward to working with you, and I really do hope that we can begin the January new school board slate with a spirit of discussion and interaction and the ability to talk to and address some of these items when they are sticky and go beyond some simple Q&A, which takes care of most issues, but not all. Thank you.
We're going to move on to Ms. Crafton.
Thank you. I'd like to echo Ms. Fernandez's thoughts around the need for working together collaboratively with fresh eyes come January. I think I would love to see us put in policy our expectations for how board members behave. I'd like to see some things about how we interact on social media and the way that school board members engage in local elections. I personally am feeling that it is difficult right now to trust some of the board members at this table because of behaviors that I witnessed myself with my own eyes during the election. So I would love to work with you, Mrs. Fernandez, to let's tackle the operations and let's tackle behavior. That's all for tonight.
Mr. Lippett.
Thank you, Madam President. As this is my last opportunity to speak from the board table, I hope you don't mind that I prepared some comments to be read. Mrs. Casagrande, with your permission, I'm going to hold my comments until next month, and I will speak them very directly to you from that podium, if that's okay. First, I would like to extend my sincerest congratulations to Lisa West on her victory Tuesday. I can tell you from personal experience that Mrs. West is a hardworking, dedicated servant to our schools. She ran a hard-fought, well-executed campaign, and I know she's going to represent our district with the same enthusiasm and vigor which she demonstrated during the election. So please allow me to wish Lisa, now officially Mrs. West at the board table, every success in her new position. To Board Secretary Mark Sigler, Trustee Susie Crafton, and Trustee-elect Mike Smith, I am honored to have run my campaign alongside you, and I will be rooting for you as you leverage your mandate from our community and move our district forward together. You are kind, intelligent, passionate leaders, and speaking for myself, I am a better person just to have gotten to know you these many months. So congratulations and much success in the session to come. To the rest of the board, Madam President, Superintendent Lons, the Cabinet and Administration of Walled Lake Schools, it has been an honor to serve alongside you these past 6 months, actually 7 now. It wasn't that long ago where I had to find the courage to speak at that podium once a month. I did it because I wanted to advocate for our community. But what you do, it is a never-ending, often thankless exercise in determination and grit, and it's because you believe, as I do, that such labors are worth it. And that's likely because they serve our most important constituents, those being our students. One of whom, by the way, is my daughter, and for that you have my enduring affection, esteem, and respect. To those in the audience, I don't know if many of you know this, but running for school board is hard. The cost is more than you might realize, a lot more, both mentally and physically. It eats hours of your day and absolutely devours your personal life. I had to reintroduce myself to my kids this past week. We candidates competed in a 5-month marathon of events, fundraisers, forums, interviews, canvassing, lit drops, and perhaps most shamelessly, in my case, begging my friends and family for money, including an unfortunate moment with my mother that I would rather not talk about in public. So what have I learned from this experience? Well, for starters, I've learned that the amazing people who do this for no money, no less, they are a bit insane, but they are good and true servants to our community. They do this because they know it has real impact on real lives. Mr. Sigler warned my wife Denise at the beginning of the election cycle. He said, "Say goodbye to your husband until after the election." And I am here to confirm no truer words have ever been spoken. So if you see a tired-looking school board candidate from either slate, this might be a good time to be nice to them. Lastly, I recognize we live in polarized times, and this has unfortunately seeped its way into school board elections. Nonpartisan, it's a term which should apply to school board service in principle, if not practice. And coming onto the board, I admit I had grand, perhaps naive visions of a body immune from the fray we see in other political realms. It was one of the benefits, honestly, that attracted me to board service. But as we now know, all elections are political. In fact, one could reason that school board elections are among the most partisan in all politics, and I certainly wouldn't argue against that point. The last 5 months, they were all the evidence that I would need. So rather than wax poetic against the state of our political discourse, I would rather simply encourage our new board to take a moment, just every once in a while, to remind ourselves that our students depend on this board to function as a single, cohesive unit. And now that the political season is officially over with, perhaps a camaraderie can be restored, which is sorely needed in board service and, by extension, our national lives. And with that, I want to say thank you to all who supported me during my time with you and in this esteemed body. It has indeed been an honor of a lifetime to count myself amongst you. If you need me, no worries. You're going to find me right back where I began, right there at that podium or in the auditorium, rooting you all on as you advocate for your kids. So with that, I will leave you with 2 short quotes that have helped me in my life. The first is from the great Muhammad Ali, who said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." I always liked that one. And perhaps now for me, I'll be thinking about this next one, my other favorite quote from the esteemed sage and philosopher Cher, who said, "You have not seen me for the last time." So with that, I say thank you to all.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lippett. I want to thank you very much for your service, for the time and dedication that you've put in working with this board and the trainings that you've been to. We truly appreciate you putting your whole heart in here, and we wish you the best, and we're so, happy that you were here to join us. I want to congratulate Mrs. West and Mr. Smith, and welcome, and looking forward to working with you both. I would like to say, Mr. Smith stole some of my thunder, so thank you very much for that, as did Mrs. Van Leeuwen. So I'm just going to, echo what they had to say, and congratulations to the Walled Lake Marching Band, and please come out and see some of the performances that are happening in our district. We are in presentation time, so there's numerous plays that are happening in a couple weeks at Walled Lake Western, is Adam's Family. We have the collage concerts coming up. Please, I know I say this all the time. I beg you all to come out and see what our students do. I beg you again, come and see what our students do. It's a fantastic experience, and we have very, very talented students in this district, and it's definitely worthwhile. Okay, now we're going to move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, I have the approval of the minutes proposed for October 10th, 2024, regular meeting, personnel recommendations of new hires and resignations, financial reports for September 2024, disbursements in the amount of $18,062,417. And then I have purchases. One, consortium fees, district-wide Oakland Schools Network Maintenance and Support, annual renewal of $36,606.19 from the general fund, and our Head Start Director's Report.
Mrs. Kaplan.
Mrs. Casagrande.
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Purchases over $50,000. Dr. Lanz.
Thank you, Mrs. Kaplan. The administration has obtained consortium pricing through the Michigan School Business Officials Aggregate Bus Purchasing Program and recommends the purchase of 11 Thomas replacement buses to the Hoekstra Transportation, Inc. This purchase will be funded from the 2019 bond funds. 3 of the buses are 77-passenger conventional buses at $140,896 each, totaling $422,688. 8 of the buses are 53-passenger conventional buses at a price of $133,412 each, totaling $1,067,296 for a grand total of $1,489,984.
Mrs. Sinkler.
I move that the Board of Education authorize the purchase of 11 buses from Hoekstra Transportation, Inc. in the amount of $1,489,984 from the 2019 bond fund.
Support.
Discussion? Mrs. Levin.
Thank you. So a year ago, December 5th, I think it was, or 6th last year, these buses were on the agenda, and they were voted down. And some people in the community wondered why and asked me to explain why I voted no. So I'm here to explain why I'll be voting no again tonight. When the board was told about this being on the agenda, one of the reasons we were told that this should happen now is because we have to have certain requirements, or we have to meet certain requirements of the bus contract, that the buses have to be an average age of 7 years or less. And so I asked the question, well, what happens if they're not? And I wasn't able to get much of an answer other than it doesn't meet the contract. But or we'd have to shoulder the maintenance cost. Okay, what's that cost? I can't get that answer. And I have a hard time voting for something without knowing what the alternative is. And I understand that the contract reads that the buses need to be an average age of 7 years old, and that this was on the 2019 bond. However, 2019 was before COVID. It was before our buses sat largely unused for a couple of years. It was when our district had more students. And while the contract has a number of years, I think in future contract negotiations, instead maybe it should be looked at as a number of miles, because these buses, although they have 7 years on their sticker on the door, if that's where stickers go on buses, they're not really 7 years of use. They haven't been used continually for 7 years. And so I'd hate to see us replacing things that don't actually need to be replaced out of fear of some unknown dollar amount or penalty. If somebody could quantify it for me, which I've asked for, then by all means, tell me. But so far, I haven't heard what that quantification is, and so I can't vote for something without knowing the alternative. It's not because I don't want to get our students to school. They get to school. They're still going to get to school. We have lots of buses. It's because I don't have all the information, and I've asked for it. I can't get it, and so I can't vote yes on something. And I think it's irresponsible as a board for us to vote yes on something without having all the information. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Siegler.
We are fortunate that we have Dean Transportation and we have Dean driving our buses. The 7 years, as I have always looked at it, is the average age of the equipment. So you have some older, some newer. We own our buses. They are not leased from Dean. This is the equipment that when we went to privatize years ago, we maintained the fact that we own these buses to save the community money versus having to go out. If we went to a different service that might have to go purchase buses, or we would be forced to purchase buses, that we would not have to, that we own these. And I believe as part of the original contract, it was 7 years average throughout. And I will tell you that with the amount of miles we put on these buses, yes, our student count might have decreased, but the amount of miles in our district has not changed at all. The amount of buildings we're taking our students to has not changed at all. And they're still getting the same amount of service that was in effect, has been in effect for years, so I have to move forward and support this motion. Thank you.
Mrs. Kaplan.
Mrs. Casagrande.
So I have to respectfully disagree a little bit with Mrs. Fernandez that we haven't been talking about this. Ever since this got voted down, I've been talking to Dr. Burney and then Dr. Lantz. So I've been having this conversation of how can we make sure that our students are safe on our buses, that we have the right equipment. Last time, erroneously, there was some comments made at the board table. I believe I'm correct, Dr. Lantz, please correct me if I'm wrong, that these buses, none of them were for special education, but some of them are for special education. They are just a different configuration, a different type of bus, and Dean Transportation has asked that we have this type of configuration. Our special education population is growing. We need to make sure that we have the right equipment. So in my tenure on the board, one of the things that we did very strategically talk about was to make sure, while we appreciate the service that Dean Transportation has given to us, we want to make sure we have the flexibility in case we do need to go to a new company, whether that's, Dean wins the lottery and closes, right, and we need somebody else to service the district. There would be nobody probably who could come up with that many buses in short order. So it is imperative to make sure that we do that. It's also fiscally responsible to use the bond money instead of foregoing this and then using our general fund money, which could impact a lot of things from a domino perspective. So for those reasons, I am absolutely in support of this, and that's why I'm voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mrs. Fernandez?
Thank you, Mrs. Kaplan. So I want to highlight that I think it's very difficult to say that we've had discussions or any information forthcoming about the buses since our meeting a year or more ago, if those are happening as one-on-one conversations and no information is being shared across the collective, which is indeed the case. Since we had the vote last year, there has not been any conversation in our official channels of communication. So one-on-ones, I can't help. I'm not aware of those, and that information is not being shared back across to the group. And so I find it pretty disingenuous that after a year and a no vote on the buses a while ago, there's been no further follow-up on some of the legitimate questions about the types of buses and the other things that were questioned a year ago. No further information about research, which I understand from some questions that, thank you, Dr. Lons, you did provide as quick as you could, some answers to. There may have been additional research. It's not been shared, at least not in time for any of us to digest that in any holistic way. My request was quite simply to ask for this vote to be postponed till next month so that we could have that dialogue back and forth and that those questions could be answered, and then wholeheartedly folks can actually vote in great conscience, yes, that the due diligence has been done. And that doesn't seem to be the way that we operate, and I hope that we do in the future. I don't know, Mr. Siegler, but I do hope that we can get some fact-based data that supports your suspicions about mileage. I'm not sure that there is data. I haven't seen any data even last year when we received quite a bit more information about the buses. And the final comment that I'll make, I did submit a dozen questions. I'm sorry, Dr. Watts. with the 3-day turnaround. And the staff in the cabinet, you do an excellent job of trying to get back to us, but quite simply, there's only time for one turn of responses, and there's no time, unless we defer a vote, for additional communication to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. We have now an owner's rep. I totally agree with you, Mrs. Casagrande, that it would be irresponsible not to use bond monies. However, we have an owner's rep now, and this is probably the single biggest thing that we're going to ask to go against the bond monies. And why aren't we looking at or using or having some support from the owner's rep in order to make the decision for this purchase? These are legitimate things. This isn't politicking and this isn't games. And I'm sure there are really legitimate and good answers. I'm not saying there aren't good answers. What I'm saying is you can't get those in 3 days' time with a one-way flow of information back into the group. And so why is it so difficult to, to postpone a vote until we can do that, or start this process earlier so that we can have that information coming into a vote and don't have to just vote no because, we don't want the community to say we hate buses and we don't want kids to be transported places. I mean, that's ridiculous setup in situations. So
You guys need to settle down. Mrs. Fernandez has the floor. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Discussion? Okay, then we're going to take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 5-2. Thank you. Moving on to the District Reproductive Health Education Advisory Board, Dr. Lanz.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Scaling.
Thank you, Dr. Lantz. Public Act 226 of 1977 requires that a school district sponsoring a reproductive health education program establish an advisory board consisting of 2 co-chairs, parents, students, educators, local clergy, and community health professionals. The role of the advisory board co-chairs is to coordinate the activities of the advisory board to help evaluate the teaching and learning process and the improvement of instruction. The advisory board periodically reviews materials and methods of instruction and recommends changes if appropriate. The process for establishing the Reproductive Health Advisory Board has been reviewed and endorsed by administration, and it is recommended that the board approve the District Reproductive Health Advisory Board as presented.
Mrs. Kaplan.
Mrs. Casagrande.
I move that the Board of Education approve the District Reproductive Health Education Advisory Board.
Support. Any discussion? Mrs. Fernandez?
Yeah, with respect to this, of course, I'm excited and happy that we would have this board. It's legally required, and so thank you. And thanks to those who have been either nominated or stood up to participate in this. However, this board was an issue a couple of years ago when it was established, and I haven't seen a single report come out of the board. I haven't seen, any of the reporting activities that are required of the board, so I'm not really sure what the board is being their activities, we know they come up in a couple of very select conversations about a particular book to be reviewed, but I have a fundamental issue with the advisory board here and assigning it without maybe them knowing really fully what the extent of the activities are being asked of them.
Mrs. Levin?
I share Ms. Fernandez's concern about the lack of reporting. We are not in compliance with a legal requirement of MCL 380.1507, Section C. We are required to have a report and have data. And I had some back and forth discussion with Dr. Lanz about it, with the most recent email coming at 4:05 today. Again, not a whole lot of time to prepare before a meeting. I appreciate you getting back to me. It's just real hard to have any sort of time to digest anything. I was told that we weren't aware there was a reporting requirement, which unfortunately just can't be true. I've directly informed this board as a private citizen years ago when the people at this table were part of the administration. So I don't want us to keep leaning on, I didn't know. There's certain things that people have to know, and there's certain requirements we have to follow. We pay our attorneys an awful lot of money to do things for the district, and if they aren't guiding us on the things that we should be doing and making sure that we're doing them, perhaps we need new attorneys. But the community, the parents, need to understand what the board does. They need to understand the work that's been undertaken, and we need to just have the transparency. This vote tonight is simply to appoint the people on the board. I'm not going to vote no on the people on the board, but it is an opportunity to bring up concerns about the process so that next time something comes up to the board, it's not because, if there's questions, it's not because somebody didn't know. Let it be on record. This is a legal requirement. We have to do things. And whatever it is, we have to comply with the law. And so I just want to make sure that going forward, we are in compliance with the things that we need to be doing for this specific requirement.
Mrs. Kaplan?
Mrs. Casagrande.
Mrs. Levin, I want to say thank you for saying what the vote is about. It's about the people on the board. It's not about what the advisory board is doing or not is doing. I think that can be a separate conversation. And I would appreciate, from a professional standpoint, that we have those conversations with Dr. Lantz and maybe with Mr. Scaling or whoever's working with that. It just really isn't something for us to bring to the public here and talk about. Quite frankly, we're voting about having a board and being in compliance with having the board. So I would just appreciate that we be professional about that.
Anything else? Any other questions? Please. Thank you. Or I'll have you removed. Thank you. Any other discussion? Mrs. Fernandez?
Yeah, I would just like to encourage us then in the coming months to figure out what that way is to get those conversations going, because quite frankly, not everyone participates in the official flow of information that moves around. And you can make requests like punting a meeting or something else, and they, despite best efforts, they can go into obscurity, and that is part of the challenge. And so there needs to be a better way to actually have any discussion. And if the Open Meetings Act means that we have to have it at this table, then I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other? Okay, let's take the vote. All those in favor of the advisory committee?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to the proclamation. Dr. Lantz.
Thank you, Madam President. Mrs. Casagrande.
All right. So before I read the proclamation, I just wanted to talk a little bit about public education from a personal standpoint, and that's why I did not speak at board commentary. Those of you who know me know that my mom was an advocate for public education. My mom went to parochial schools. She really didn't have a choice. That's where her family wanted her to go, and I'm not saying anything negative about wanting to go to a somewhere other than public education. But in my mom's case, her experience was not everything that she wanted it to be. My mom wanted to take certain classes, and she was told that she could not, because at the time, girls were supposed to take this, boys could take this. And so when she had children, and she had 2 girls and a boy, and I'm her middle child, and she really wanted to make sure that her girls could take any classes they want and have any opportunity and to become, what they wanted. She always personally wanted me to be a teacher, and I told her, well, Mom, I'm not going to be a teacher, but I will, teach in my job, being a leader and being a supervisor and manager, but also that I think she passed away. It'll be 2 years this January. But one of the things we talked about a lot was why I came to be a school board member and why I advocated for public education, because everybody deserves an education. And as I have sat in this role, I have learned so much. You come in and you don't know as much, and you learn and you understand maybe your, I had a child who had an IEP. I don't talk about that a lot publicly because that's his story. But the education that our kids are able to get and are not judged, and they can come in and have an education is really heartfelt for me. So I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation, but I just wanted everybody to understand a little bit of why public education is so personal to me. Whereas public education is the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And whereas public education employees, be they educators, substitute educators, administrators, custodians, bus drivers, secretarial, paraeducators, food service professionals, skilled trades workers, or technical employees, work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism. And whereas public schools are the foundations of neighborhoods and communities, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common purpose. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Walled Lake Schools Board of Education and Administration proclaim November 18 through 22, 2024 as the observance of National Education Week.
Thank you. Board policy adoption. Dr. Lund.
Thank you very much. The updated board policies were provided to the board at the October 10th, 2024 meeting for review. The updated policies are in alignment with current law.
Mrs. Fernandez.
Mrs. Kaplan. I move that the Board of Education adopt the updated board policies as presented.
Support.
Discussion. I would just like to say thank you very much to the committee for working diligently and trying to bring our policies forward. And I appreciate all the hard work, and hopefully we can continue moving forward on all of our policies. So thank you. Let's take the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to Oakland County Schools Board Association OCSD dinner meeting. And I'll read the motion. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say we might want to see if Mrs. West and Mr. Smith are available for that evening.
Yep. Did you?
Ms. Byer, do you have that information?
Okay.
Thank you.
So then I will insert your name. Okay. I move that the Board of Education approve the attendance of Mrs. West, Mr. Siegler, and was anybody else going? And Mrs. Levin, at the Oakland County School Boards Association dinner meeting on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024, and authorize payment of the registration fee.
Support.
Anybody have any comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Bless you. Motion carries 7-0. And with that, we are adjourned at 8:36. Thank you.